Breaking news! At 8:03, a Ukrainian Abrams suddenly appeared, and within minutes, a Russian convoy was reduced to smoldering scrap. Today we bring you images and verified data that some applaud as an example of tactical precision, while others condemn as extreme provocation. Subscribe if you believe Ukraine was right to destroy the Russian convoy, and share your stance in the comments. Was it a necessary deterrent or a step that destabilizes the region even further? Stay tuned, because in the next few seconds we'll explain how a single maneuver shifted the local balance and may redefine Moscow's response. At 8:03 local time, in a farming strip near Chasiv Yar, a Russian column advancing at reduced speed suddenly halted, when through a patchy curtain of residual smoke and a line of trees blackened by prior strikes, the silhouette of a tank emerged that didn't match the usual profile seen on this front. It wasn't a T-72 nor a modernized BMP, but an American-made M1A1 Abrams, recorded for the first time conducting a direct offensive action in this particular sector of operations. The appearance, captured by the sensors of a Ukrainian reconnaissance drone, generated immediate surprise among the Russian troops. Several of them, according to later analysis of intercepted audio, initially thought it was a rebuilt Soviet armored vehicle. That misidentification opened a brief window of seconds, which the Ukrainian crew exploited to fire the first shot against a BMP-3 partially concealed behind a dirt mound. The sabot round pierced the side armor and triggered an internal deflagration that lifted the hull, scattered fragments nearby, and left the position without immediate support. There was no prior radio warning or deployment of Russian smoke screens. The sequence shifted abruptly from a methodical advance to a scene of tactical disorder. At 8:07, already in the Kursk Oblast, high-definition material associated with Ukraine's 47th Mechanized Brigade revealed something rare. Two key platforms, the M1A1 Abrams tank and the M2A2 Bradley infantry fighting vehicle, moving in parallel while maintaining a security corridor and alternating cover, forming an assault formation aimed at breaking rigid points of the opposing defense. In front of them stretched a Russian line supported by windbreaks and dense tree strips serving as natural barriers, reinforced with hand-dug trenches, improvised machine gun nests, and semi-buried shelters. A Ukrainian observation drone, operating with an encrypted data link, recorded the moment the Abrams fired again. The blast wave shook the vegetation and generated a cloud of dust and splinters. Seconds later, the Bradley on the left flank began sustained fire with its 25mm cannon, sending controlled bursts at moderate pace to maintain accuracy and avoid overheating. This saturation reduced Russia's reaction time. No immediate artillery fire or effective use of portable anti-tank systems was detected during the first minutes. The only visible signs were intermittent flashes and black smoke columns piercing the treetops. At 8:10, a relative pause occurred. The drone raised altitude to widen its observation cone, while the Ukrainian crews checked for incoming kamikaze drones. Under the tree cover, Russian personnel movements became visible, abandoning primary trenches to regroup in lateral corridors. The apparent goal was to create a route toward open fields to the rear. By then, the Abrams had already left its initial point, and following a shoot and scoot pattern, repositioned northwards and fired another round which, according to thermal data from a second drone at higher altitude, produced an intense heat signature lasting several seconds. The firing cadence, roughly one shot every 12 to 15 seconds, revealed a rapid target acquisition cycle supported by turret stabilization and second-generation optical sensors. This behavior matches Ukraine's emerging doctrine, using the Abrams not as a spearhead for deep penetrations, but as a precision asset to neutralize critical nodes, lower enemy morale, and open targeted breaches for light mechanized infantry to exploit. The Abrams delivered to Ukraine are export variants from which the U.S. removed sensitive electronic components, including certain encrypted communication modules and parts of the fire control system. But they retain Chobham composite armor, advanced thermal sights, full stabilization of the main gun, and the ability to fire kinetic energy sabot rounds. This configuration grants high survivability against standard ammunition and boosts lethality in semi-open environments like those between Kursk and Chasiv Yar, where line of sight is longer than in urban scenarios. The crew, according to training sources, completed weeks of adaptation to integrate accelerated maintenance procedures and fuel consumption management, a critical factor due to the turbine engine. In the episode described, field reports indicate the Abrams fired at least 5 rounds in under 6 minutes, while the Bradley complemented with bursts of 25mm rounds aimed both at infantry positions and at parked light vehicles that could carry anti-tank systems. A key element was ISR persistence. The main drone remained on station for over 15 minutes, transmitting coordinates and hit confirmations in real time, while secondary platforms monitored the perimeter to detect flanking threats. At 8:17, 2 Russian vehicles, later identified as adapted armored transports, attempted to retreat northeast using a ground depression. The route had been mined overnight by Ukrainian sappers with pressure charges and low-signature magnetic sensors. A powerful detonation disabled the first vehicle and triggered a fire that served as a visual marker for other operators. Russian infantry nearby scattered in multiple directions. Some retreated abandoning weapons, others sought drainage ditches. Enlarged images showed a loss of command cohesion at that stage. At 8:21, the Abrams took a third firing position, adhering to the policy of not staying longer than 5 minutes in the same spot to reduce the risk of counter-battery artillery or Lancet drones. This mobility disrupted Russian targeting cycles, which require several steps: detection, transmission, calculation, execution, before fixing coordinates. The shortened time frame made it harder for the enemy to close its OODA loop. In one of the following exchanges, an intelligence report described how, at nearly 2 kilometers distance, an Abrams sabot round struck a T-72B3 partially hidden behind a deteriorated storage structure. The kinetic energy tore off the turret, flinging it several meters before it landed in flames, confirming catastrophic destruction. This result fuels the prior debate over the Abrams' suitability in the Ukrainian theater. Outside critics had pointed to its heavy weight, logistical complexity, and fuel consumption as drawbacks. However, the performance shown demonstrates that a single unit, correctly integrated with a Bradley and ISR support, can create disproportionate effects by neutralizing several fortified points and forcing local retreats. The key lies in the mode of use. It wasn't deployed as a massive shock force, but as a precision instrument used only when solid ground, sufficient visibility, and electronic cover were available. From a technical standpoint, the Abrams' thermal acquisition capability allows it to cut the interval between identifying a priority target and firing effectively to under 30 seconds, even during moderate lateral movement. Against emerging threats, such as Lancet kamikaze drones, Ukrainian forces deployed jamming systems that created electromagnetic disturbance zones, limiting their terminal guidance. Though electronic warfare cannot guarantee full interception, the combination of tank mobility and noise saturation increased survivability during the combat cycle. Throughout the 25-minute engagement, no critical damage or crew casualties were reported, reinforcing Ukraine's narrative that even in small numbers, the Abrams makes a tangible tactical impact. At 8:24, a secondary drone operating at medium altitude detected with optical and thermal sensors a small group of Russian soldiers cautiously moving south, using a strip of shrubs and uneven ground as lateral cover. Although vegetation provided partial visual concealment, the system's infrared cameras clearly registered the heat signatures of their bodies against the cooler ground, allowing their path to be tracked and confirming they were attempting to leave the contact zone. With that information, the Bradley shifted slightly, right for a cleaner firing angle, and executed a short, controlled burst of 25mm rounds in front of and beside the group, generating fragmentation and acoustic pressure sufficient to force them to halt and seek cover at the shrub line. Simultaneously, the Abrams crew, continuing its shoot and scoot pattern, prepared its final direct action, a sabot round against an improvised shelter a few meters behind the soldiers, built with stacked sandbags, planks, and reused materials. The impact produced a shockwave that destabilized the structure, collapsed part of the parapet, and raised a dust cloud mixed with glowing fragments. Immediately afterward, Ukrainian listening systems stopped detecting radio emissions from that point, suggesting loss of local coordination. Once the firing phase ended, the sector was covered in drifting smoke and fading thermal residues visible in infrared images. Meanwhile, Ukrainian teams on the ground, including forward observers and forward maintenance staff, conducted a quick assessment to decide whether to consolidate, exploit the breach, or withdraw to a safe area to resupply fuel and ammunition. The entire clash, 25 minutes from first shot to stabilization, goes beyond mere chronology. It validates the operational tactic of using high-tech platforms with integrated ISR as a punctual strike tool against rigid concentrations, proving that measured coordinated use can create disproportionate effects without compromising deployed assets. Strategically, the elimination of vehicles and disruption of Russian personnel implies a loss of tactical initiative in a stretch where Moscow was trying to stabilize logistics lines for future rotations and rebuild degraded units. According to military analysts consulted, the documented operational debut of the Abrams forces Russian command to review the density and distribution of layered anti-tank weapons, an increase of upgraded Kornet missiles with enhanced thermal sights is expected, as well as greater use of next-generation Lancet kamikaze drones with higher resistance to jamming, and expanded electronic warfare capabilities to disrupt Ukrainian control and video links. Russian logistics are also likely to adapt, dispersing ammunition depots, splitting vehicle parks, and using more aggressive multispectral camouflage to reduce vulnerability to coordinated precision strikes. On Ukraine's side, major challenges remain. Turbine maintenance in dusty environments requires specialized support chains, constant supply of JP-8 or equivalent fuel competes with other transport priorities, spare parts depend on secure logistics windows, and ongoing crew training is essential to sustain operational tempo without degrading critical components like power modules, suspension, and optics. Western sources emphasize that Kyiv will carefully evaluate whether to expand the number of Abrams deployed simultaneously, accepting higher costs and exposure, or to maintain them as a surgical intervention resource reserved for decisive moments where a sudden incursion could fracture rigid defenses. A massive deployment, they warn, would accelerate wear, raise sensitive component consumption, and make it easier for Russian intelligence to detect usage patterns, adjusting artillery, drones, and ambushes accordingly. In summary, the episode not only produced immediate material effects, but also forced both sides to recalibrate their balance between firepower, logistical sustainability, and technological risk management. Questions remain. Will a model of combined operations consolidate, where every Abrams deployment is paired with reconnaissance drones, Bradley support, and mobile electronic warfare? Will Russia respond by accelerating integration of thermal sensors and loitering munitions capable of penetrating jamming? Can Ukraine sustain the required logistics during a prolonged campaign without compromising other fronts? The answers will shape the coming weeks in Kursk and Chasiv Yar. For now, the record of this episode offers concrete insight into how the controlled introduction of heavy Western technology can alter combat microdynamics and generate disproportionate operational effects. Don't miss a single detail. Subscribe and turn on notifications to receive our real-time analyses of countermeasures, logistics routes, and key lessons learned. We'll be on the ground, documenting every tactical turn as soon as new information emerges. Thank you for following our coverage.